In this episode of Cosmic Sponge, a man with a black hole in his spinal cord hands out warnings of the apocalypse. A Russian astronaut lobbies Japanese women for gas money, and for our main topic, we find skeletons in the closets of some of our favorite monsters, with a brief aside to discuss mummy digestion. What do you call a mummy that has bowel problems? Tutankhamun.
Well, I guess he doesn't have to go very far for something to wipe himself with, right? Welcome to Cosmic Sponge, the podcast where we discuss weird wonders in the world. I'm Stephen Hall.
And I'm Jimmy Coe.
In this episode, we are going to be exploring Halloween monsters. Classic Halloween monsters. The monsters that you see decorated all across your neighborhood. Frankenstein, Dracula, the Mummy, all of these things. Are we doing the Mummy?
We're doing the Mummy. And Snakehead Terror Lake guy. That
right.
FX Super film.
And Jimmy, did you want to update the listeners on the contest?
Yeah, we already have some entries. The contest is up and running. It's been running since Monday and runs until the stroke of midnight on Halloween. And then we will pick a winner, I think, the next day on November the 1st. We will release the name of that winner on our next episode following that November 1st. So it would be November 8th, right?
November 6th.
November 6th. Math, it wasn't my strong. Actually, it was. It tells you how bad everything else was.
Yeah, man, you're a programmer. Math is your strong suit. Come on.
It's amazing my software works.
All right, man. Well, what have you been up to this week?
Oh, well, I've got a story which I think is one of the better ones I've found in a long time. It comes from the Mirror. Let me just get into it. Here's the title of the article. Man claims black hole in spine predicts end of world as thousands flock to his farm. The leader of a minor political party in Cambodia called on his supporters to join him in his home and avoid being wiped out in a biblical flood he prophesied was imminent. He's in Cambodia. He's warned his believers. Thousands of them show up at his place. He posted this on Facebook, so he's tech savvy. He has got 370,000 followers.
Oh, we all know how tech savvy you have to be to post something on Facebook. You have to be near the genius level.
Well, I don't know. If you think you have a black hole in your spine, I'm impressed you can post on Facebook.
I'm impressed you can do anything like exist.
Right.
You've got a black hole in your spine.
How can you resist that gravitational pull to get your fingers to the keyboard? I don't know. I don't know how this works. But the only place to remain untouched by the biblical-style floods would be his farmhouse. Well, that's where the black hole is. I'm not following this logic
convenient.
at all. Yeah. Now, it's the black hole in his spine that's sending him messages about the apocalyptic flood.
Oh, I see.
And he can't sleep because whenever he sleeps, his spinal cord is pulling so hard because the world was breaking down and water is flowing into the gap, he wrote. Yeah, it's a lot of people there. Yeah.
And he's a member of a political party in Cambodia.
Yeah. The Cambodian embassy in Seoul has since issued a public statement warning migrant workers not to abandon their work and to go back home. They've had such an outpouring of people going to this dude's farm. An estimated 15,000 and 20,000 people arrived at his house. So he got a bunch of homeless people camping outside his house.
Wow.
I mean, he must be very charismatic.
No, it's the black hole. It's pulling them in.
It's pulling everybody from Cambodia to this guy's house.
They're all surrounding him in an accretion disc.
So, well, we got this going. He's president of the League for the Democracy Party, formed in 2005.
All right.
So we've got that going for us in Cambodia.
All right. I have one here. A woman scanned by Russian astronaut who claimed to need money to return to Earth. I guess technically be a cosmonaut. So the man claimed he needed money to pay landing fees once he was back on Earth and a rocket to actually fly him home.
I'm confused. I don't understand. Is he like somewhere else? And
he's in space.
He's in space. And
right.
he needs money.
I guess on the International Space Station, but he needs money to return because, there's landing fees. You got to rent a rocket.
Oh.
They charge a lot of money. So, yeah, a man claiming to be, have you heard about this? Have you seen this?
Oh, is he a Nigerian prince? I think I have.
Well, it could be.
He's a Nigerian-Russian rocket prince.
A man claiming to be a Russian astronaut in space allegedly scammed a Japanese woman into paying for his return trip to Earth, vowing to marry her once he landed. The man found the 65-year-old unnamed victim on Instagram in June. On his profile, he uploaded random photos of space and said he worked at the International Space Station, where astronauts have limited access to cell service. Their relationship quickly escalated online. He repeatedly said that he loved her and proposed marriage. He sent her messages like, I want to start my life in Japan, saying, this 1,000 times won't be enough, but I'll keep saying it. I love you. But to actually tie the knot, he said he needed money to return to Earth. There were landing fees to pay once in Japan and the cost of a rocket to actually fly him to the country. Believing that the man would be her future fiancé, the woman paid him about 4.4 million yen, which equates to about 30,000 American dollars in 5 installments from August 19th to September 5th. But when his demands continued, the woman grew suspicious of his intent and reported him to police, who are investigating the case as a romance scam.
Boris, how is it you have such beautiful things? Just lucky.
I almost had enough money to return to Earth, to go to Japan and marry my love.
Well, with that bad Russian, I'm surprised he got away with it that long. Just saying. Well, it's from black holes in Cambodia to Russian romance princes in space.
Every time I hear Cambodia, it makes me think of there was a punk band back in the day called the Dead Kennedys.
Oh yeah, I know the Dead Kennedys.
You ever heard?
Yeah,
they had a song called Holiday in Cambodia.
Yeah, our mutual buddy Frank exposed me to a lot of music.
Yeah.
Or music in quotes.
Well, what he calls music.
That's right.
I would say. In some cases.
In some cases. Some case it was experimental. Much like his college days.
Avant-garde.
Yeah, there you go.
So let's move on to tonight's main topic. But before we do, I'd like to remind everyone to please rate and review the podcast. It helps other people find the show. Look for us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and be sure to check out our webpage, www.cosmicsponge.com. There you can find the web store and also ways to support the show, such as buy me a coffee. You could become a patron and gain access, among other things, to our Weird Wonders show, which we produce exclusively for our Patreon supporters. So on to tonight's show, which is about where did all these Halloween monsters come from that you see taped to the inside of everyone's window, including mine. And Jimmy, I know you've done a little bit of legwork on this one, so why don't you get us kicked off on famous Halloween monsters?
With a stroke of a pen, the damn dirty hippie killed both Dr. Frankenstein and likely his monster. It was the next to last paragraph, and Mary Goodwin, satisfied with the ending, put down her pen and smiled. It would end up in a pile of short stories written by a bunch of early 19th century free love intellectuals as part of a contest to see who could write the best horror story in the midst of a rainy Swiss summer of 1818. Neither she nor her cohorts could imagine those stories would lead to what would become two of the biggest films of 1931, Dracula and Frankenstein. And not just because they were written before movies were being made. While Percy Shelley and Lord Byron were the pros in the writing competition, the Lifetime Achievement Awards would go to Mary Goodwin, soon to be Mary Shelley, as she and Percy would be married later that year, and Lord Byron's personal doctor and part-time spy, John Polidori. Mary would win for her novel Frankenstein, and Polidori for The Vampire, a story based on Byron's failed attempt at the horror genre, but one Polidori was able to craft into a work which would inspire Bram Stoker's seminal work, Dracula. Fast forward to 1931, and Carl Laemmle Jr., only in his early 20s, was working as head of production for Universal Pictures, an impressive feat until you realized his dad owned the company. Based on a successful run from another production house of the German film Nosferatu and several stage productions of Stoker's famed novel, Laemmle purchased the rights to Dracula for $40,000. Dracula the movie was released in February of 1931, and within 48 hours of its New York opening, it sold over 50,000 tickets. Seeing the possibility of the horror genre brought on by the monster movie, Laemmle fast-tracked a second production based on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which ended up being another box office hit, released later that year. These successes launched a monster franchise at Universal Studios, which would, in addition to Dracula and Frankenstein's monster, include the Wolfman, the Mummy, and the creature from the Black Lagoon. The cinematic portrayals of these monsters would bring to life myth and folklore dating all the way back to the dawn of man. Tonight we're going to search history for the origins and inspirations that catapulted these terrors into the golden age of cinema and beyond. Steve, where do you want to start, man?
I think it's pretty obvious when we do look at all of these caricatures that we use as decorations. Most are derived from film. Most have their origins in some type of literature. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. You know, it's interesting. You talked about the 1816 and them having their writing contest. Well, they were at like a summer home or summer resort, and it was real rainy, bad weather.
Yep.
That was the year without a summer. Have you ever heard about that?
No.
The volcano Tambora erupted in 1816 and blocked out the sun's rays. You know, we talk about climate change. We talked about it extensively in last week's episode. But yeah, it's known as the year without a summer. There was a frost like in June. Thomas Jefferson wrote in his journals that his peach trees or one of his fruit trees were dying because of a frost in June and stuff. So yeah, it was a very cold, very dreary summer. So they were all stuck inside and decided to write stories.
Yeah.
Instead of being outside enjoying summer activities, I guess.
So I'd like to start with Frankenstein's monster. Did you know that the story is based off of real people? They did a little digging, and the first person it's based on is a guy named Johann Conrad Dippel. And the reason we know this was he was a German mystic, scientist, fraud, alchemist, and
you could do everything back then.
Yeah, he was also that guy that talked loudly from the middle of the theater. He was he was probably the chief inspiration for Victor Frankenstein. And then another incident was probably more geared toward the actual experimental side. The first clue you have that this guy, Johann Dippel, might have been the inspiration for Frankenstein was that he was born in a castle called Castle Frankenstein. And this overlooks the city of Darmstadt in Germany. And Shelley set some of her chapters in her novel at this old fortress. She adopted the name of the fortress, Frankenstein, for her main character, Victor.
Have you ever read Frankenstein?
Years and years and years ago. I've seen a lot of movies.
This is arguably the very first science fiction novel.
Mm-hmm.
Here we have elements of science, bringing someone back from the dead. And this was a time of great change in Europe in particular, where we started seeing the beginning of industrialization. Their electricity seemed as if it were a magic force that was beginning to be harnessed and could be put to use. So you had a lot of scientists that were experimenting with electricity. There were published studies where scientists would take a frog, a dead frog, and zap it with electricity, and it would twitch its limbs, twitch its legs.
Oh, there's a story coming. Yeah, with that, there's a story coming for the second person that inspired this Frankenstein tale.
And also, this was a time whenever the medical field, they were learning a lot more about the human body, becoming less superstitious when it came to things. So medical schools needed cadavers, and they were known to pay unscrupulous people to dig up cadavers. So there was a lot of grave robbing. We see that in this Mary Shelley story. The final thing is this story opens in Antarctica. At that time, no one had been to the South Pole, and sailors were still skirting around the edges of Antarctica and trying to map it. And then in the north, in the Arctic, there was a lot of exploration in the Antarctic. This is where all of the world's adventurers and explorers had left to find out about.
Yeah, and he doesn't die at the end, the monster. You think he dies at the end. But basically jumps off the ship and gets on an iceberg or something, right? And then floats away. Now, he says he's going to commit suicide.
Spoiler alert. It's only 200 years old.
Yeah, for all of you who haven't seen the 500 different films that have been made on it, including the Abbott and Costello one.
Yeah, well, and I would like to point out 1930s movie version with Boris Karloff. It's really nothing like the I don't want to say nothing like the book, because it's a lot of things that are in the novel, but then the narrative is not the same, I should say.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, digging up corpses and creating a monster and bringing him back to life, and then having to deal with the consequences of raising this monster from the dead is the theme of both works.
Yeah.
And of course, Frankenstein's monster in the novel didn't look anything like the Boris Karloff with the bolts in the neck and all that. But that's what we see whenever we see everyone just says Frankenstein as the name of the monster itself. We see that character that was created by Boris Karloff.
Yeah, the bolts were a huge improvement. That way his head didn't fall off. Back to the original guys, though. Dippel, this guy in Germany, he was a little wacky, and he claimed that the second coming of Christ was imminent. And one of the things that I found pretty curious was that he developed a thing called Dippel's oil, which was supposed to make you live longer. And a lot of people try to sneak into the castle and get this recipe for this oil that was supposed to extend life. Many people saw him as a fraud, not least of all because he said he was going to live past 100, and he died of a stroke well before that, probably from drinking Dippel's oil. But
what was it, mercury?
Probably. Now, the second historical figure, which is the one which I was like, okay, come on. Mary Shelley didn't write this story. She just transcribed a story that happened. There's a guy called Luigi Galvani.
Galvani.
Yeah. And
that's who I was trying to think of.
That's right. He created this process called galvanic. Well, it's called the galvanic process. And it's where you would apply electricity to dead animals like frogs. Now, his nephew, Aldini, said, hold my beer. And he went running with this thing. He had a assistant, and he had the assistant go to procure a fresh corpse. Now, typically murderers back in those days in that area, when they killed somebody, their bodies were dissected. They would dissect them before burying them. But in this case, his assistant went out, and some say he fast-tracked this trial of this man who presumably murdered his daughter and his wife in a canal. And so they convict him and they hang him. Now, instead of dissecting them, this guy convinces them to give him the body so he can take it to his...
Now, when you say they dissected him, you mean the medical, because I know exactly where this happened. This was very close to a medical school, and they convinced him to say, hey, is that what you mean when you said they immediately dissect him?
No. I mean, they cut people up in different pieces and tossed them. Now, whether they use some of those people for medical purposes.
You mean dismember them?
Dismembered them. Yeah.
Oh.
So,
okay.
And for what reason, I don't know. It had something to do with the religious belief that they wouldn't be allowed into the kingdom of heaven. Some kind of little side doctrine. Anyway, they kept this guy together. They brought him in, laid him on a table in this big room, an auditorium room, where they were going to do experiments. And Aldini applies electricity to this guy. And what happens? His eye twitches open, and his hand pumps up in the air. And then he takes this rod and shoves it all the way down in his spine, and then applies electricity, and the body starts thrashing around and jumps up. And it is so terrifying that the assistant who procured the body thought the man was coming back to life, had a heart attack and died.
Oh. Did he then put the electricity on that dude because he might have brought him back?
Probably. I don't know.
Could have been the very first defibrillation.
It could have been. But that's essentially what happened with this guy. So you can easily see from the dissection, the electricity being applied, the procuring a corpse, doing experiments on it, and then this other guy with an elixir that's supposed to extend life. You can see where all of these things sort of factored into the story that became Frankenstein. So really, Mary Shelley just plagiarized a story. Did you know that in the movie...
It's a great story.
Yeah. You know, in the movie, the special effects were, this was before special effects were given awards, probably before they even had awards for things in general for movies. But the head of special effects got a Tesla coil from none other than Nikola Tesla for the scene in the film.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, that was a neat little tidbit I found while doing research into this. So, yeah, that's the history of Frankenstein.
I know when Frankenstein came out that it completely terrified audiences. They went running from the theater, that seeing Frankenstein come to life terrified audiences. And we watch it today and it seems pretty tame compared to what's out there now. And the old version, I think it was Frankenstein, actually had a man walk out from behind a curtain. I don't know if they still show this or not, but a man walks out in a tie and suit, like he's part of the theater or something, right? As if you're getting ready to watch the movie. And he walks out from behind a curtain and warns everybody about how terrifying this movie is.
Oh, no,
they started.
That was Dracula, wasn't it? The actor who
it could be.
Yeah, that was the actor who played Van Helsing. He would come out, and that was removed from the release of the film because it was deemed too spooky or scary for setting up people to be really scared. So they removed it from the original film and they placed it back in, and it was found, recovered, and they placed it in some kind of special release that Universal had years later. Yeah.
I've seen it, yeah. Mm-hmm. I thought that was Frankenstein, but that's cool.
Yeah.
Dracula.
Yeah,
long as we're on it, let's hit old Dracula.
Yeah, do you know where the word vampire comes from?
Vampire. No.
Yeah, so I was curious, when did this word start being used in common parlance? And 1600s, as early as the 1600s, and it really got used in the early 1700s and started to being recorded, but there are roots of it going back to the 1600s. They think maybe it's Serbian, and that's where vampires originally come from. Now, it's this book by Polidori, who was the personal physician of Lord Byron, the famous author, and also a deadbeat. So he had a lot of creditors after him. So some of the creditors paid Polidori, his physician, to spy on him so that they could get information about his whereabouts and how much money he had and where he might have money hidden away. But Polidori writes this book, The Vampire, based on the short story that Lord Byron wrote. But in his book, it is a nobleman who is the vampire. And usually the vampire was some like peasant or criminal or petty thief or something like that prior to that. And this is the first time you had a nobleman be the vampire. And that's what inspired Bram Stoker to write Dracula.
This was the first example of a charismatic and sophisticated vampire. Before, it was more or less just a monster that preyed on people. But this is the birth of the sexy vampire.
Yeah, Gary Oldman. I never drink wine. Yeah, so I was looking at the stories about vampires, and the earliest one I could find comes from the Carpathian Mountains. They're to the east, and this is actually in Medveda, Serbia. It comes from 1732. There is a quiet cemetery, and Johannes Fluckinger, a regiment medical officer dispatched by the Honorable Supreme Command, surveyed the scene of this cemetery with the Carpathian Mountains in the background. And he was very uneasy because all of the local people had been talking about this vampire, this creature that would come out at night and kill people, animals. It really doesn't matter as long as it had blood. This thing was coming out and killing everybody, really, in the area. They actually dug up the people in the graves, exhumed them, did dissections and checked them out, and then they cut off their heads and burned the bodies and the heads of the corpses to get it to stop. And they say it came from this guy called Arnaud Paoli, who had fled his post in Turkey after being troubled by a vampire there. And he settled in the village and was betrothed to the neighbor's daughter, and then he had an unexpected death. But that didn't keep him away. Nope, not this guy. He dug himself out of his grave and started eating people. At least that's as the story goes. They dug him up, they drove a stake through his heart, and then they did the whole, cutting him in pieces and burning him, I guess. they said that when they drove a stake through his heart, and this is the written record from the people in the town, according to their custom, they drove a stake through his heart, and then he gave an audible groan and bled copiously.
I remember that was a belief that there was blood in the heart of the corpse when they dug him up, that they were a vampire.
Yeah.
And it brings to mind, remember a news story I did a few weeks ago about where they would often bury the people that were suspected or they didn't want their loved ones to become a vampire. They would bury them with like a sickle across their throat, or they would bury them upside down. There's all kinds of strange practices around this belief in vampires.
Put big rocks on their head.
They would also sever the tendons at the knees, I guess so they couldn't walk around. So that's one way to do it. But, there's vampire myths or similar type creatures all over the world. China, the Middle East, Indian subcontinent, we see similar type creatures.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what was going on back in the day, that they thought all these blood drinking critters were up walking around taking people out. What's your favorite vampire movie?
Oh man, let's see. That's a tough one. I just recently watched Interview with a Vampire. I like that one pretty good.
The new one or the old one?
I don't know. I didn't know there was two.
Yeah, there was one that was done with Brad Pitt and
Tom Cruise.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I like that one pretty good.
Yeah, and then there's a new one that's just, I don't even know if it's out yet. Maybe it is. I think it's going to be a series, a television series.
And, the old classic Dracula, of course, that's great. And then there's, some of those old Christopher Lee movies are always good. The Dracula movies from the Hammer films,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The Dracula and vampire movies from those days. I always like it whenever there's a vampira involved.
Yeah, I liked Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula because you get to see Keanu Reeves act.
Yeah. I like that one quite a lot too. I read the novel and the movie's very close to the original novel, Bram Stoker's novel. Mm-hmm. I like it for that. Pretty good. Yeah, I like all those, but there's a lot that I don't like. I don't know. They got a little too
artsy.
Yeah, too much leather, dark makeup, and I don't know, just kind of weird.
Too much leather. I don't like films with leather in it, or
I don't know,
or cows. Really, anything with a hide, I don't like watching.
Right, and so again, I guess our image of vampires that we see as caricatures around Halloween are based on the Bela Lugosi version of Dracula.
Yeah, and they got the guy who played Van Helsing was also the Van Helsing who played in the stage productions that were going on at the time. Now, Nosferatu was illegal. They made that film, and then Bram Stoker's estate sued to have it shut down and all the copies burned. And they thought it was lost, but a couple of copies survived, and so we still have it today, and it's a great film. It's a fantastic early film. Pretty good. With Count Orlok.
Have you ever seen the movie that has Willem Dafoe?
That's my favorite vampire movie. That actually is awesome. Yeah, that's a great film. He didn't win an Oscar that year, but Shadow of the Vampire. Yeah, that's a
good film.
Yeah, he's great when he snatches that bat out of the air and then bites off the head and sucks it down. That's awesome. So that's a great film. Let's
not talk too much about it, but listeners, it's not a super well-known movie, but if you haven't seen Shadow of the Vampire, it's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, it's got a lot of different great actors in it. John Malkovich is in the film, and the guy who plays Wesley in Princess Bride. What's that guy's name? I don't know, but yeah, who plays the Dread Pirate Roberts. He's in the film. He's good. I think they all get eaten. Spoiler alert.
What is next on the agenda?
Well, we can either do the werewolf or we could do the mummy.
You pick it.
Let's do the mummy. What do you call a mummy that has bowel problems? Tutankhamun.
Well, I guess he doesn't have to go very far for something to wipe himself with, right?
He's wrapped in Charmin.
I got a good one for you. This isn't on your list.
What's that?
The origin of a jack-o'-lantern. You familiar with that?
Oh, we're just skipping right over mummies and we're going right into the jack-o'-lantern.
All right, let's go back to mummies.
No, let's do the jack-o'-lantern. Now that you put it out there, I got to know.
The term jack-o'-lantern was originally used to describe the visual phenomenon of something known as foolish fire, or a will-o'-the-wisp in English folklore. Used especially in East England, its earliest known use dates back to the 1660s. The term will-o'-the-wisp uses wisp, a bundle of sticks or paper, sometimes used as a torch. And the proper name will, thus will of the torch. The term jack-o'-lantern is of the same construction, jack being the lantern. The carving of vegetables has been a common practice in many parts of the world. It is believed that the custom of making jack-o'-lanterns at Halloween began in Ireland. In the 19th century, turnips or mangel wurzels.
Wurzels? What's a wurzel?
Mangel wurzel.
What's a wurzel?
Some of our European listeners may be able to.
It's hard to say.
On what a mangel wurzel, hollowed out to act as lanterns and often carved with grotesque faces, and they were used on Halloween in parts of Ireland and the Scottish Highlands. In these Gaelic-speaking regions was also the festival of Samhain, and was seen as a time when supernatural beings and the souls of the dead walked the earth. Jack-o'-lanterns were also made at Halloween in Somerset, England, known as Punky Night. There.
Punky Night?
Punky Night.
Like kryptonite. Punky Night.
No,
nothing like it.
Punky
Night. Punky Night.
Like the night of the punkies.
Yeah. I still don't know. I mean, I listened to all the words you said, but I still don't quite understand what the point of it is.
It's like a lantern, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I'm glad we took this detour.
All right. By those who made them, the lanterns were said to represent either spirits or supernatural beings and were used to ward off evil spirits.
There we go.
For example, sometimes they were used by Halloween participants to frighten people, and sometimes they were set on windowsills to keep harmful spirits out of one's home. It has also been suggested that jack-o'-lanterns originally represented Christian souls in purgatory, as Halloween is the eve of All Saints' Day.
Really?
Which is why we call it All Hallowed Eve.
Oh.
Because it's the eve of All Saints' Day.
Oh, so it's
your last chance to get out and raise some hell before the holy day, the next day.
I got my pumpkin and a bottle of whiskey. I'm ready for a good time.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. You know, my favorite movie about pumpkins is probably The Headless Horseman. Growing up as a kid.
That's good.
Yeah.
Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah, Sleepy Hollow. That pumpkin head flying out of this dude's hand, and then what's his name? What's the main character's name?
Ichabod Crane.
Yeah. Mr. Crane never shows up again. He just disappears.
Yeah, that's a great story. And my favorite pumpkin movie is Pumpkinhead.
I knew you were going to say that.
I love that movie.
It's a story about a wee lad that doesn't make it.
Well, yeah, and six a vengeful spirit on to those responsible. Yeah, it's a fantastic movie.
Yeah, and Pumpkinhead 1 through 5. I don't know how many movies they have of that.
I know they made a second one. I don't really remember much about it. The first one's good. I don't know about the rest of them. I'm sure I've seen them, but they didn't make much of an impression on me, I don't think.
Yeah, so
The Mummy.
Yeah.
What do we got?
Well, when I went looking at The Mummy, there wasn't as much with The Mummy as there are with the other three monsters, Frankenstein, Dracula, and Wolfman. They have way broader backgrounds. With The Mummy, it appears that it really starts out more in the nature of romance and sex. In the 1800s. You know, this is a time when people like Mary Shelley, who were stealing the stories of people who had already lived that life, were also other women were writing about getting it down with corpses, I guess. I don't know.
A little necrophilia.
There's something wrong going on there.
Well, oddly enough, not just women. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, better known for writing
The Ring of Thoth. Something like that? Yeah.
He did
I'd forgotten
a mummy
about that.
story called Lot Number 249.
Oh, that's a great story.
Yeah, so it was genre at the time. But I think when we look at the horror genre, of course, The Mummy from the 1930s, also Boris Karloff, right? Was it Boris Karloff?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, and
plays Imhotep.
You know what? I watched a movie last night, maybe the night before. I think it was last night. I watched a movie with Boris Karloff in it called The Falling, I think. No, that wasn't it. It was Die Monster Die.
Ooh, I haven't heard of this. I got to see it.
From 1965. It was loosely based on an H.P. Lovecraft story, The Color Out of Space. Very loosely, I might add.
Yeah, there was a movie based on that done recently with Nicolas Cage, I think.
Yeah, that's based very closely on the story, and I liked it a lot. I'm a huge H.P. Lovecraft fan.
Yeah,
so.
I know. But Die Monster Die. I'll have to put that on my to-watch list.
And Boris Karloff, pretty old in it, 1965, but he was a good actor, man.
Yeah.
I mean, he was really a whole nother level of the other people in this film. The film itself, it was okay, but he was very good in it.
Yeah, I was trying to reconcile this movie that came out of Universal Picture Studios and this source material, which was predominantly based on more sexual romance sort of front. Now, it is sort of like a romance story, right? Because the revived or the Imhotep's girlfriend from back in the day. What is her name? Something like Akmuna's son, something like that. And she's been reincarnated, and he's after his reincarnated love. But apparently, the story really was derived from Tutankhamun's excavation, and because there was this whole mummy's curse, because several of the people involved with that dig passed away under, I won't say suspicious, but bizarre circumstances. And they attributed it to the mummy's curse.
King Tut's opening of the tomb was super big news because this was the very first tomb that had not been touched since ancient time. Grave robbers or generations from before had pretty much robbed all of the tombs in the Valley of the Kings, which is where King Tut's tomb was. And then when Carter found this tomb and they opened it up, it was full of treasures, gold, statues, and just
artifacts galore.
Amazing amount of artifacts. And afterwards, some people died that was on the expedition. So this rumor began that there was a mummy's curse. This excavation was opened on November 29th, 1922. So it was still pretty fresh in the memories of everyone whenever this movie came out in the 1930s. I think that was the terrifying thing. They disturb the mummy and the mummy comes back to life and extracts his revenge.
Yeah, my favorite mummy movie is the Brendan Fraser one.
Oh, I love that movie.
Benny, you're on the wrong side of the river.
That movie's great.
That's a fantastic film
for many reasons. There's a lot of great scenes in it. The second one, not bad. Third one, it's kind of like.
I don't think I saw the third one. I walked in the room while it was going on, and sort of, it's halfway through the film, and I'm like, I probably should sit down and watch it from the beginning, and never got back around to it.
Yeah. Well, when you have the first one, it's a love story too.
Yeah. They have a kid.
I love ensemble casts, where they're going in to find this treasure. So you've got all the different characters, and the Americans are there, with all their guns, and it's a lot of fun. Yeah,
that's a great film. So you want to move on to the Wolfman? Wrap this thing up?
Yeah, let's do it.
I got some stuff on the werewolves. You know how you become a werewolf? I found a list. There's this huge list. Let me read off some of these. You can become a werewolf by being bitten by another werewolf.
Yeah.
Right. Or scratched or clawed. Spit on. If he looks at you sideways across an empty room.
Sort of like COVID.
Exactly. It's what it is. COVID is actually a werewolf disease. You can also get it if you sell your soul to the devil. It's one of the gifts you get in return for selling your soul. You can wear an enchanted belt made of wolf skin or fur. It's known as a wolf belt. No.
Well, okay. A wolf belt.
Yeah. You can apply magic lotion to your body and it turn into a wolf. Black magic, witchcraft, writing lycanthropic flowers, white or yellow, preferably, inhaling certain potions like Dippel's potion. Simply wearing.
This is almost like a Jeff Foxworthy thing.
Yeah.
If you inhale Dipple Potion, you might be a werewolf.
Wearing an animal's pelt, any animal pelt, really, you can turn into an animal, I guess.
Yeah, lycanthrope.
Drinking water from a wolf's paw print, or eating the brain of a wolf, or his intestines, his butt. I mean, you eat any part of him, you're going to turn into a wolf, I guess. There's spells, rituals. If you have sex with a werewolf.
Wow.
Yeah. Eating an unborn fetus. Just move that right off the list. Wearing a belt made of the skin of an executed criminal. Where do they come up with this stuff? Be cursed by a witch.
Who would wear a
or
belt
a troll
from an executed criminal?
Oh, here
it's like, God.
Wait, here you go. Being born on Christmas Eve. Yeah.
Why would you be a werewolf being born on Christmas Eve?
I don't know. Being blasphemous and getting cursed for your sins. Genetics. Drinking downstream from wolves.
Man.
Sleeping on a Friday night under a full moon.
What are you supposed to do on a Friday night?
But the moon has to be shining directly on your face. If you're the seventh son, if the child is conceived under a new moon, you're at high risk. Not going to confession for 10 years. So
you might be a werewolf.
Yeah. Being gruesomely murdered on a full moon, you might come back as a werewolf.
Well, how are you going to become a werewolf if you've been murdered?
Or being
now we're getting into the undead. This is
this is ridiculous. Being chosen, and this last one, being chosen by the Native American wolf spirit. That seems a little bit more reasonable than being born on Christmas Eve or drinking Dipple's potion.
I don't know. The wolf spirit's going to pick you to become a skinwalker.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So this goes all the way back to the dawn of mankind. And the way we know this is because cave paintings have a mix of humans and animals together. And this goes back, 20, 30, 40,000, 200,000 years ago, maybe a gazillion billion years ago. They have this going back to really early man. Did you know that the Norse have berserkers? So Vikings.
Yep, bear skin.
Yeah. Bear is B-E-R is bear, B-E-A-R, and zerk means shirt. So if you're wearing a bear shirt, basically the skin of thing, it was supposed to infuse you with the power of that animal, and you'd go into battle and you'd go bear crazy on people. So, I mean, Vikings had a lot to do with transitioning it into what would become the Middle Ages, where it really took a huge shift. Because before it was just like, you're putting on the skins of wolves and bears you've killed at a hunting party.
And kind of infuse their viciousness and
you're dead sitting around the campfire, you're telling your stories, you're wearing your little costume, you're partaking of you're doing a Russian roulette with the psychedelic mushroom patch as you're dancing around, you're doing a little thing, and then all of a sudden you're a Viking and you're going around killing people with antlers on your heads.
Yeah.
Then it comes, I was looking at different customs around the world in terms of were creatures, because werewolf is the most popular one, but did you know the Japanese have a were-cat? And
were-cat?
A were-cat in their mythos. And the South Americans are probably the lamest. They have a were-possum. I kid you not. That's their big, terrifying animal, a were-possum. Though possums are creepy-looking creatures.
I mean, what else are they going to have? A were-llama? I mean...
were-llama? Maybe a were-sloth?
They could have had a were-jaguar.
Oh, yeah.
Which they probably do in some of their myths, I'm sure.
Without a doubt. And I looked,
jaguar.
I looked through, the earliest written work, the Epic of Gilgamesh has a shepherd being turned into a wolf by Ishtar. And then, you got Greek historian Herodotus tells of a shape-shifting people called the Navari or the Nuri. Of the Baltic peoples. And
a tribe he places in the northeast of Scythia.
And then you got lycanthropes, right? Which comes from King Lycan. And I think that was was that Roman or Greek? I don't know which. But Zeus comes down.
Would have been
That'd be
Greek.
Greek. Okay, so Zeus comes down and he hears about this King Lycan and he wants to go spy on him and check him out because he's hearing some weird things about this cat. So he goes in and Lycan can sense that Zeus is or isn't. He's not sure whether maybe he's a fraud pretending to be a god. But either way, he tries to feed him baked boy. And Zeus realizes it, gets pissed off, and turns him into a wolf. Curses him, and he has to run off to the wolf. I did, however, find a pretty good story. This is a great one. It's the Werewolf of Bedburg. It's a very famous wolf case, and the guy behind it, who was a werewolf, his name's Peter Stump. He's a wealthy farmer accused of serial murder, cannibalism, and being a werewolf in the Rhineland in 1589. In the years preceding his first arrest, the town of Bedburg had been plagued by horrors. Dead and mutilated cattle were laying around, but soon bodies of townsfolk were being found in the fields. At first they thought maybe it was wolves doing it, but then a hunting party cornered what they thought was a wolf, and it turns out it was Stump. And Stump had a messed up hand, and the wolf they knew had been hit earlier in the front forepaw, same paw if the Stump had become a werewolf. So, if it looks like a wolf, smells like a wolf, and has a messed up
barks
paw
like a wolf,
yeah, then it's a wolf, right? So they got him. They went ahead and put him on the rack, and on the rack he confessed to whatever they wanted. He confessed to killing 14 children and 2 pregnant women, eating their flesh, of all kinds of just horrible, horrible things, of talking during the movies. Everything that you can think of, he just confessed to it, and then was sentenced to die by being attached to a breaking wheel and then having his flesh torn from his body with hot pincers. And then his limbs were broken with a blunt side of an axe, so he couldn't rise from a grave. And finally was beheaded, his head put on a spike next to a breaking wheel, and with a picture of a wolf on it as a warning to others. His daughter and mistress were also flayed, strangled, and burned, just for good measure. And at the end of the day, they're not sure whether or not he really committed the crimes, because he was a wealthy farmer, but he was also Protestant. So all of his stuff went to the Catholic Church. It was a warning to anybody who had more than $1.50, because the church was pretty greedy with money back in the day.
Yeah, there was several cases there in Geneva. A man killed 16 children when he changed himself into a wolf, so it was said. He was executed on October 15th, 1580. There was a peak attention to lycanthropy in the 16th and 17th century as part of the European witch hunts. A number of laws on werewolves were written in France during 1595 and 1615. Werewolves were cited in 1598, and a teenage werewolf was sentenced to life imprisonment in Bordeaux
after losing a basketball game.
1603. Yeah, that was right up there with the witch hunts. I think it's pretty easy to say probably people watching movies in today, and of course we're looking at was it who played the original Wolfman in the old 1930s? All these monster movies were made in the 1930s.
I want to say Lon Chaney, but he had died already.
I was thinking it was Lon Chaney. And then, of course, in the 1950s, Little Joe, Michael Landon, Highway to Heaven, Michael Landon, Little House on the Prairie.
Yeah.
Played I Was a Teenage Werewolf. You ever seen that film?
No, I don't think I have.
Yeah.
Well, that's crazy, man.
But I always think it's interesting when you look at it. I think everyone that's ever watched a werewolf and a vampire movie, you think about it, because I always like the werewolf because you have this affliction or this disease, this uncontrollable thing. And when you turn into the werewolf, at least every movie I've ever seen, you have no memory of what happened, what transpired. You hear about all these horrific murders. You look down, you got mud on your feet.
You're like, I didn't do it.
Or got flesh in your teeth. I mean, I don't know. There's the scenes where they try to chain themselves up so they can, live through the whole werewolf curse thing.
Someone killed Fred last night. Someone killed Fred and ate him. And then the wolf guy is going, man, Fred tastes awesome. He's really good. Put a little dimple lotion on him and he's good to go. Good.
I mean, compare that to the vampire. You can live forever. You got eternal life, but you have to eat people. Or you at least have to drink their blood, and you can only come out at night unless you're in Seattle, apparently.
And no garlic, so Italian food's out. I mean, why go on living?
Yeah, I couldn't make it.
No. There's no reason to keep going.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's the thing. The vampire, the allure of the whole vampire story is that eternal life, but you have to sacrifice seeing the daylight, and well, you have to be pretty evil. You have to, I guess, unless you're Brad Pitt's character and you just live on rats or something for a while, or dogs. I don't know.
Yeah, because you're lame, big whiny brat.
These days, people get more upset with you killing a dog than a person in a movie, anyway.
Well, I understand that. So, wait, I mean, what are you going to do? Some people suck.
All right. Do we have any other things we want to cover on Halloween monsters or Halloween traditions?
Yeah, we didn't cover our favorite Wolfman movie.
Oh.
What do you got? I know mine.
I don't know.
American Werewolf in London.
Oh, yeah. That's on, I think it's on, maybe on Shudder, actually. But I know it's on Prime or Shudder right now.
I watch it all the time.
That's my all-time favorite werewolf movie as well.
Yeah, horror films I tend to watch every year. I will watch that one. I'll watch Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow, not because I like it, but because my wife loves it. And then it's not a bad film. I just don't particularly...
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. The Thing, I watch that every year.
Yeah.
That's a great film. The original. With Kurt Russell.
Yeah, the one with Kurt Russell. Yeah, that's in my top 5. I mean, I own the movies, so...
Yeah, the special effect artist for that worked on American Werewolf in London as well.
Yeah. And that was back in the day. It was all physical effects. I mean, mechanical effects. There was no CGI.
Yeah, it's all practical effects.
I love that.
That's great stuff.
But yeah, the American Werewolf in London, it's a great story. It's got some humor. Quite a bit of humor, actually.
Yeah.
And he gets bitten. And, one thing in the old movies, do you remember if they got the bite, they would have the pentagram where the bite was? I never could figure that out. It's like, doesn't look like teeth marks. They get a pentagram on wherever they were bit, like on the ankle or whatever.
Yeah. I could see that dentist going, well, there's something strange about your teeth. They're all in the shape of a pentagram. It's going to cost quite a bit, to get your teeth fixed, kid. Can you see those braces?
And of course, these days we see a lot of other monsters that are being portrayed. I mean, there's Ghostface from the Scream movies, Freddy Krueger, of course, and who could leave out Jason from Friday the 13th. Those are also iconic Halloween imagery that you'll see this time of year.
Yeah, those come later. So that's like the second group, right? Those are the slasher monsters from all the slasher films. I don't know. I sort of prefer the older ones.
I like stuff that's more supernatural, I guess. And some of the stories that I find creepiest, as far if they're done right, are ghost stories.
Yeah.
But, ghost stories have been with us forever. As you were saying, the legend of the werewolf being from ancient times before the written word, we see images of people taking on the form of animals. Same thing with ghosts. Ghosts and spirits have been with us forever. It's just in all kinds of literature.
Oh, yeah. Fairies and woodland critters and all kinds of freaky stuff.
I did look up vengeful ghost.
Oh, yeah. What kind of vengeful ghost did you find when you looked them up?
So a vengeful ghost or vengeful spirit is said to be the spirit of a dead person who returns from the afterlife to seek revenge for a cruel, unnatural, or unjust death. In certain cultures where funeral and burial or cremation ceremonies are important, such vengeful spirits may also be considered as unhappy ghosts of individuals who have not been given a proper burial. Or proper funeral, rather.
What constitutes a proper funeral?
Well, if it's important that, let's say you're from the Christian faith, it's important to have a funeral, right? And someone preside at the grave as you're being buried. I guess Catholic have their last rites and all that.
Yeah, I don't
proper,
know.
Instead of somebody stuffing you in a chimney or something, right?
Right.
And bricking you behind a wall, that's not exactly a proper funeral, right?
Yeah, I wanted to be turned into a lamp, and my wife said absolutely not.
Oh.
Yeah,
what are you going to be turned into then?
A little lamp with a little, my hand up there, click off.
That'd be kind of weird, man.
Yeah, and it has to be in the house at the entry door. So anytime she brings a suitor home, she has to turn on the light and they see me.
Yeah.
Big grin on my face.
Yeah, I know my wife, we've already talked about this. She would most definitely be a vengeful spirit.
Oh, God,
if,
yes.
something ever happened to her. So, yeah, it's it for me.
She'd definitely be a vengeful spirit.
Well, all right, man. Is there anything you have to add to famous Halloween monsters?
No, but I am very excited about Halloween coming up. I'm looking forward to doing some fun stuff.
Yeah, man, it's my favorite time of the year. I love the weather. I love the atmosphere, scary stuff, monster movies. We watch them all year long. So yeah, it's just kind of our time.
Yeah. You going trick or treating with the grandson?
Maybe. I don't know. That's a good question.
I don't have any kids that want to go out anymore. You know, they're all in their late teens and 20s.
Yeah. Well, you know, it won't be long.
Yeah.
You'll have the little grandkids running around.
Yeah. Meanwhile,
they're a lot cooler than your actual children.
Yeah, I creep people out when I go out trick or treating. They say I'm too big.
We used to have a lot of fun. Sometimes Mary and I would dress up when Stephanie was little, my daughter, and we would dress up too and take her. That was always a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
and they got great costumes these days. I've been thinking about getting a Bigfoot costume for the show.
Yeah, go for it, man.
For the show.
Now, do you get it? Yeah, for the show, quote. Do you get any trick or treaters where you live?
No, I mean we are in the middle of nowhere, so we get.
Yeah, I never either. I leave the light on every year, buy candy every year, and Mary's like, nobody's going to show up, and I'm like, oh, you never know, and then nobody ever shows up.
You're like, yeah, I know nobody going to show up. That's why I bought the candy.
Yeah, that's why I got this bowl of candy.
It's my candy.
Well, I guess nobody showed up.
That's what I'm going to start doing. I'm going to start going to the houses in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, of course, that would be fun.
Of course, that's the way you get
They'd
killed.
be excited about getting a trick-or-treater. They'd probably give you like a whole bag full of stuff.
Trick or treat.
Hey, all right. Yeah. All right, man. Well, I think that is all I've got for the history of Halloween monsters. Jimmy, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I think we've covered everything. Just if you guys would like, head on over to our YouTube channel or to our website, and you can see the prizes that are in our Halloween contest. And
it's on Instagram, too.
Yep. One person wins it all. So go check it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Check it out for sure. Yeah. Don't forget about the contest. Try and enter this week because it ends next weekend. Right?
Yes. Next week. I think it's Monday is Halloween. Is that right?
Well, it'll end a week after this episode airs.
Yeah. So this airs on the 23rd. It's going to be the 31st. So that's going to be a Monday.
Be sure and enter. You don't want to miss out on those great prizes.
Yeah, no obligation. Just enter an email address. We don't bother you or anything like that. It's just to give these prizes away to some of our listeners and hopefully
have some fun.
Yeah.
Before we get out of here, I'd like to remind everybody to please rate and review the podcast. It helps other people find the show. And also, whenever you go to Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, be sure and like and up thumb and do all that kind of stuff. Those things matter. We appreciate everyone tuning in each and every week. Our webpage is cosmicsponge.com and our contact information is firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. If you'd like to reach out to the show, maybe have suggestions, corrections, any of that kind of stuff. And if you have a story to tell of some extraordinary event that has happened, Bigfoot sighting, UFOs, or anything, we would love to hear from you and share it with our other listeners on the show. So be sure and send that in. You can remain completely anonymous. Jimmy, did I leave anything out?
Yeah. When do werewolves go trick-or-treating?
I give up.
On Halloween.
Well, all right. With that being said, this is Stephen Hawk signing out, and we'll see you next week.
And Jimmy Coe, keep your eyes to the skies and your feet on the ground. We'll catch you next week.
Halloween.
What do you get if you cross a werewolf with a hyena?
I give up.
Man, I don't know, but it'll join you in on the laughs.
Yeah, that's good.
Silly jokes.
Actually, it's not that good, but I like bad jokes.
I do too. It's the dad in me.
Yeah.
So what are you going to dress up as for Halloween this year?
A podcaster.
Man, I'm
just gonna wear my headphones and carry a microphone.
That's a lame costume.
Yeah, well.
You know what I'm gonna go as?
What?
Podcast.
Hand out some Cosmic Sponge cards instead of candy.
Oh, that's a good idea. I should go out Halloween and start handing out cards. Cards and candy bars. I'll hand out the big candy bars.
Yeah, mothers will be like, sheltering their children and trying to get away.
Oh, yeah. Cosmic Sponge is not really geared toward children. It's more for the parents.
All right, let's get out of here.
Definitely. And see. That's all for this week's episode of Cosmic Sponge. Please don't forget to rate and review us wherever you listen. It helps others find the show. If you have any questions or have a story you'd like to share, you can contact us using our email account at firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. If you'd like to support the show, consider becoming a Patreon at patreon.com/cosmicsponge, where you get access to exclusive content, including our Weird Wonders news and stories released every week. To explore everything Cosmic Sponge has to offer, including other ways to support the show, head on over to our website at www.cosmicsponge.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.